Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Chris Stokel-Walker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm very grateful for you getting up quite so early after our party last night. I hope that there's not too many sore heads. We are unfortunately going to be discussing a really important issue that is going to vex us, I think, for the coming years. Future-proofing the news, which is a huge issue. We're going to have, as you can see, a brilliant panel of some of Europe's biggest broadcasters, publications, news agencies coming up in a short period of time. But first, we're going to get a presentation here from Dritan, Nesho, CEO of HarrisX, trying to set up, I think, some of our issues. So please do welcome Dritan to the stage.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your time this morning. I'm just going to make sure we have the presentation. Hopefully, this data will be provocative enough to wake some of you up, given that it's early in the morning. So I think we can get the presentation. HarrisX is a global research consultancy, and we conduct a lot of research at the intersection of technology and media. For this specific session and for GlobeSec this year, we conducted a study of over 3,000 respondents across the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Italy in a randomized fashion, and we showed them a collection of real content and deep fakes. And after the fact, we asked them, or after each of the reveal of each of the content, whether they thought that this was real or not real. And what we learned is that in the age of AI-driven misinformation, at best you lose 1/3 of your audience to fake content, and at worst you lose over half of it. And here's what we mean. On average, only about 63% of the respondents across the countries could really correctly tell whether the content was AI or whether it was real. And you can see that the figures speak for themselves. But 37% could not.
I've never heard that.
Even real content, such as this one, where President Trump was
down to 100 and then down to another number. And I said, you have to open up your whole...
President Zelensky showed up to the White House.
Go back 1 second. But, you know, sometimes the content in and of itself is incredulous. So this was President Trump responding to the meme taco. Trump always chickens out in the end. And you can see that as a baseline, 21% didn't think that the content was real. 69% in this case did. But when the content...
President Zelensky showed up to the White House wearing an outfit from Temu, and I found that very disrespectful, I have to be honest. I'm going to start calling him Temu Zelensky from now on. Someone get this guy a suit, for Christ's sake.
Right, so this was one of our interns who spent about 10 minutes building this through artificial intelligence tools. Temu is not available in the United States, just so you know, so especially for American audiences, this would not be a familiar outfit, but you see that 2 in 4 Americans, 40%, could not recognize this as a deep fake, and 37% globally as well. Here's another example that 47% incorrectly identified as real. This is another deepfake. This was voice-based. And essentially, Trump has always teased Canada about becoming the 51st state. But he has never gone as far as saying, you know, we should conquer it. And we basically created some copy that said, a lot of Canadians will welcome us. They wouldn't fight back. They know it's better as part of a speech. And in many cases globally, 47% on average, they could not tell whether this was real or fake.
Canada would be much...
And then we showed an example of a deepfake that surfaced right after the start of the war in Ukraine. This was widely publicized as a Russian misinformation campaign, as a deepfake. So the audience is very conditioned. But 75% correctly said that it was AI generated. 25% still thought it was real, even though it's very, very abrupt and very, very rough as a deepfake. But when you create something a little bit more subtle, even though people are prompted in this study after the first few examples, to really try to figure out whether content is real or not. In this case, 50% incorrectly said that it was real. And of course, we have hidden the nature of the symbols in order not to popularize these types of content or deepfake. So some of the learnings from the experiment. In an environment where a third of voters or more can be swayed by artificial intelligence and deepfake content, frankly, it could tip any election. And no public is safe before an election or otherwise. And as generative AI is improving, it's not only fooling people about what fake content is, but also it's making them distrust what real content is. After the experiment, on average, 40% of people said that they can tell the difference, whereas at the beginning of the experiment, they were a lot more confident that they could distinguish between deep fakes, AI-driven content, and real content. The shorter the content is, the more subtle it is, the more effective it is. This is a problem because social media runs on short-form multimedia content. And again, if it is absurd or if it is too far-fetched, people tend to question it more. But the more real it is, the more concerning it is. And so these are a set of provocative findings. I have some other research and information in terms of regulation. Simply put, people would like this content regulated. Over 7 in 10 believe that there should be guardrails and a regulation framework. And I think that this is very important because we are at the beginning of this revolution. And this revolution is about to upend the news, is about to possibly upend elections and society at large. Similar to social media, but in this case on steroids. So with that, thank you, and I will go through some other data points during the presentation.
For Dritan. Thank you very much, Dritan. And if I can maybe also ask you to welcome similarly our panelists on stage. So first, can I have Beata Balogová, the Editor-in-Chief of SME here. And then Stephen Capus, President, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. Very welcome, Stephen, please. We have Liz Corbin, the Director of News at the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union. And we have Roman Imielski, who is First Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Gazeta Wyborcza. Brilliant. Just to flag also, you will see on our screen behind, we have got a Slido open for you, and we will have some Q&A time at the end. There will be a QR code that you can look at, which will appear on screen shortly, and you can maybe put in your questions there. I have an iPad ready and waiting to hear those thoughts. There you go, up on screen for you. A really provocative, I think, presentation by Dritan. Beata, when Dritan was presenting there, you kind of leaned over and whispered something in my ear. What is your reaction to that?
That I would like to put the findings of the presentation into real context. When we think about autocrats and dictators, we very often imagine these aging guys who can direct armies against demonstrators or ride half-naked a horse. And we don't associate technological advancement with them very often. But that's a mistake, and I think that with the developing AI models, autocrats and oppressive regimes get a powerful tool. And maybe I would mention some examples. 5 years ago, when we explained to our readers what is the difference between a fake news site and a real site, we referred to lack of quality. We said, look at Pixel's photos, look at how it is not professionally done. It's no longer true. In Hungary, I just read recently that one of the main propaganda outlet, Origo, fired people and laid them off. And even though I'm not sure how much they use AI content, but it really sends a message that autocrats no longer need people, or not journalists. We don't even call these propagandists journalists, but they no longer need people who would do journalistic processes because they don't do journalistic processes. So that's why I think it would be a big mistake, and we shouldn't repeat the mistake when we allowed the platforms to grasp power without any control of national governments or Europe, because the consequence will be given the ability not only spread fake news, but censor, track sources we are using, basically multiply and enlarge any narrative. I just read recently that Business Insider also laid off 21% of their employees because of anticipating the drop of traffic. It means more pressure on media, and if you imagine media in captured environments like Slovakia, Hungary, partly Poland, they're already tackling so much pressure, verbal attacks, harassment, troll farms, which can be, again, with the use of AI and new technologies, you can so effectively harass journalists. So if you add the fact that these media will face drop in visits, because people no longer will come to your website to ask about the weather, to ask about health advices or where I should go for my holiday. So basically, it adds up to pressures. And maybe I'm here to be the scaremonger and to be very pessimistic. So I add one more.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I don't want to be too pessimistic on a Saturday morning. But I mean, you mentioned pressures on the media. Steve and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, well documented the pressures that you're facing as well. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think this is a time, first, my initial reaction to seeing the presentation is kind of what we're living in, which is an age of information warfare. And I have to say that my assessment is that it's not going well. We are up against very well-financed and very determined people who want to manipulate information. Information is power. Human beings have an insatiable curiosity and a desire to be informed, entertained, and so everybody look at in pretty much every room that you enter these days, and people are staring at their phones, seeking whatever they can find. There is undeniably an effort right now to control the information space. I don't think anybody will ever control it. However, those of us who are purveyors of accurate, truthful information are up against very strong forces. You talked about RFERL's existential crisis that we have right now. It's grounded in funding. And we're continuing to fight, and we're still here. We intend to win this battle to keep Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty alive. But at a time when public service broadcasters all across the world are having their budgets slashed, are having cutbacks in newsroom, the tools available to journalists are being taken away. I think that this is a time when we should be joining forces. This is not a time for competitiveness, that the forces who would like to be the purveyors of disinformation are very active, and they're not going to stop at anything. You see what they've done with manipulating, what Russia's done with manipulating elections in Romania and Moldova, and the tremendous amount of resources that are being poured into manipulating information on a daily basis. We need some help. And if we try to do it alone, I think we're going to lose this effort. Right now, the true value that we bring to this information battleground is that there is a desire still among people to seek the truth, to seek accurate information. If we lose that reputation, then it will be lost. And that's why they spoof our websites, they take our content and disguise it as or they take our websites and put their own bad information in and make it look like it's something that's coming from a trusted source. It's all designed to make things cloudy, make it difficult to figure out, have people just kind of throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to believe. That's what they're looking for. So we just can't give up. And I think this age of AI and is really a dangerous time for all of us.
And Liz, Stephen mentioned they're kind of working together. I know as the EBU, you do this already. I mean, how are you kind of preparing for the age of AI that Stephen and Beata have both said are very, very scary times?
All credit to Steve and the team at RFE-RL and their incredibly difficult situation, and we're 100% supporting you and in any practical way that we can. But yes, working together is and there being some things that, of course, we must be competitive to improve the industry and to make sure journalism is at the top of its game. But on other points, we should be working more together, and the competition is not necessary. And so, as public service broadcasters, so I'm the director of news at the European Broadcasting Union, better known for Eurovision. But we have a very strong news department and cooperation in the news space, and pooling resources. When we have fewer and fewer resources across our membership is really important. So in the age of AI, for example, we saw all of those excellent examples in the presentation. You can no longer use your eyes to decide whether something is real or fake. Anybody who's seen the output of Google's VO3 in the last couple of weeks will realise that there is just no way, as an individual with no context, you can tell the difference between a real video and a fake video. And that's only going to improve even further and get cheaper. And so that's where journalism comes in, and it's where expertise comes in, to be able to find the context behind that video. The source of that video becomes increasingly important. Is that source reliable? Do you know who they are? Where does it come from? How did they make it? Were they there? We have recently launched something we've called Eurovision News Spotlight, and we have more than around 30 broadcasters now. They're fact-checking and verification teams all working together. So instead of every one of those 30 organisations each having a fact-checker looking at a video, trying to do the geolocation and trying to establish the source and the time and all of the other aspects of it, and putting it through an AI checker, one has to do it, and that benefits all of the other broadcasters that are part of that collective. So initiatives like that to cooperate and to share that information are critical. We're here for the public at the end of the day, the citizens that need access to quality information, and they are being bombarded with absolute trash across all of the different platforms that they are inhabiting. And it's our job to try and reach them with quality information and for them to be able to trust our brands and our brands to be seen on those platforms. And just one other point on this. This is a point that was starting to be made earlier, which was the traffic to our websites, to our platforms, as in being increasingly disrupted by AI as well. So any of you have Googled a topic this morning, yesterday, you will have read the overview. Did any of you go to the website that information came from? Like, probably about 5% of you actually went to the website. So this increasing way of accessing information and the big tech being in between the journalists and our audience is a challenge that is far greater than the social media challenge that we've faced over the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, there's a huge issue in terms of the sort of just cratering of traffic. I was looking at something yesterday that suggested that kind of the number of bot requests on these websites has increased 49% quarter on quarter, and that is just being put into kind of our search results. I think I want to get onto that in a little bit, but I'm keen. You talked, Liz, about kind of just being bombarded with trash. One of the ways I think that all of our speakers so far have suggested that is coming to us is through social media. And I know, Roman, you actually dislike that idea of calling social media. Do you want to maybe explain a bit more about that?
Yes, because social media, it means that this is the legacy media. This is not the legacy media. The legacy media is newspapers, radio station, television, and others. We are using at the Gazeta Wyborcza in terms of social platform. Social platform. They are not any. They have no any editors, journalists, and etc. Do you know how many fact checkers right now has Meta, the owner of the Facebook in Poland? No one. No one. This is unbelievable. So this is the problem with big techs, and I referring to what Beata said. I'm not a fan of the regulations. EU market are over-regulated, but we have no regulation on big techs. This is the big problem. After the pandemic, I think that was the barrier between the so-called normal world and abnormal world, because after the pandemic of coronavirus pandemic, we showed that the social platforms are unbelievable spreaders of fake news, disinformation, etc. Really. Maybe you don't know, but we don't know the algorithms of the Google, Facebook, and TikTok and others. This is a big problem because we don't know what they can promote on this big social platforms all over the world. We as a journalist, and we showed before the last election in Poland that it was very surprised, but they promoted many far-right politicians. Why? Why? Because the far-right politicians in Poland are a biggest advocate of the not regulate big techs. Because they are spreading, this is fake news, this is anti-Semitic sometimes, how would say, no, anti-Semitic disinformation and Russian disinformation, etc. So this is very useful for this politician. What Elon Musk said, that everybody has their own truth. Flat earthers, that they are true. Anti-vaxxers, that they are true, yes? And one of the, I don't know, maybe the famous professor from the Harvard University is on the same level for Elon Musk. This is the big problem. 2 months ago, we published an interview with Polish Minister of Digitalization. And this is very interesting because this minister said it's a normal situation that the Polish government don't know what the algorithm has Facebook, Google, TikTok, etc. So Polish government don't know what this platform will promote during the, for example, presidential campaign. We have last week's presidential campaign in Poland. And who is the winner of this presidential campaign? The conservative politician. Who supported this man? Many trolls, many fake news campaigners, etc. And the second one, the biggest, if you talk about the last election in Poland, the second winner is leader of the Confederation, far-right party. Of course, he got only 15% of the voters, of votes, but this is unbelievable huge difference between the previous presidential campaign in Poland. So yes, we should regulate big techs. We should know everything about the algorithms. We should be fact checkers, and we should believe in the. At Gazeta Wyborcza, we believe in the mission with the quality journalism, and we should be very, very careful to use AI tools as a journalist. Of course, many of these tools are very useful. Many of these tools are very useful, but our credibility is most important. I can't imagine the situation that we will replace our authors by AI. Some media outlets did it.
Yeah. And that's what's really interesting, because I think actually you're doing this in some way and recognizing that is an issue. Beata has talked about Business Insider replacing large numbers of their journalists. Liz, I know that
And it was very interesting what Liz said, because we know that social platforms try to kill legacy media, because this is the business for these social platforms.
Well, there is an interesting question that's come through on the slide that I want to get to in a second. But before we get to that, Liz, do you want to maybe expand, as an organisation that is thinking about using AI responsibly in this world, some of those values that you have?
So we have joined forces, not just with all of our members across the public broadcasting world, across industry across Europe, but also with WANIFRA, which is the world's largest association of newspapers and news publishers. Also with other broadcasting unions across the US, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and the Arab States Broadcasting Union, big collective of news organisations coming together to say there are 5 principles about how we should work with technology companies related to AI. And I don't think we have the slide, so you're going to have to remember the 5 points. But a first principle, which is absolutely you cannot get to the other principles without this. They must have our authorization before they start using our content. Currently, they are scraping valuable news content to create answers and services for the public. And that's, quite frankly, theft. They need to stop stealing our content. Secondly, they need to recognize the fair value of that content when they're using it to make money for themselves. So recognizing fair value if they have the authorization. Thirdly, and maybe this should be the first one, accuracy and attribution matter. The public that are experiencing news content through AI platforms should be confident and be able to be confident that it's accurate, and they should know where the information comes from. Fourthly, the plurality of the news media is something that needs to be protected and will benefit these AI products, chatbots, assistants, etc. The plurality of the media means across every language. Oh, sure, OpenAI will do deals with the Washington Post and a big British newspaper and a broadcaster a big broadcaster in Sweden and big publishers in Germany. That's no use if you speak Czech or Estonian or another small language where you have less content. It's really important that those AI assistants work in your language and also promote the content from your local newspaper, your local radio station. The plurality of the media will benefit these products, but currently there's no sense that they're doing that. And fifthly, let's talk. We have something as a news industry that they need. They want their products to be accurate, to have good information, to be usable, to be useful. And so we should talk. Let's not make the same mistakes that we made with social media, where there was just us and there was them, and we tried to coexist, but without properly talking to each other. So we urge tech companies to talk to each other, talk to us, and failing that, we call on the regulators to make them.
Yeah, which is really interesting. I think everybody on this panel has just nodded at me to ask to say something in a second. So I'm going to come to Beata, then I'm going to come to Steve, and then I'm going to come to Rowan. But actually, I want to bring in Dritan, because Dritan, just briefly, you've worked for big tech companies in the past. You've heard Liz's 5 values that she lays out. Many of them involve conversations with big tech. How much appetite do you think there is in the big tech industry to actually engage with us as journalists?
Well, I would say that I agree with everything that is being said right here. But I have a different perspective on the approach that's needed to be taken. Simply put, you cannot fight tomorrow's war with yesterday's weapons and tools. And everything that I'm hearing here is yesterday weapons and tools. You cannot rein in AI given the speed, scale, and sophistication that it has. The only thing that can keep AI in check is the proper use of AI by outfits like the ones that are represented here to do the fact-checking in real time and counter misuse of AI in real time, to amplify good journalism and the voices and the facts of good journalism. And to me, that is the only counterbalance that is an effective counterbalance in this age. We failed to properly regulate and properly engage with the social media space. A very wise, political campaign manager, very successful elected presidents of the United States, once asked the question, how is it possible that we could create guardrails around nuclear weapons effectively as a human society, but not around social media? And the answer is because with nuclear weapons, you see the damage in a very blunt and very direct and very fast way. With social media, the damage happens through small clicks and through small interactions. And with AI, it will happen even faster. So what I would say is that the perspective also needs to shift. There is an appetite from big tech to work and make sure that to work with the news media, work with governments, and make sure that its technology it's properly used. But what they will not accept is their technology being regulated in such a way that it doesn't allow them to foster the technology. Their job is to push this forward, so we have to keep that in mind. And instead of fighting it, you have to jujitsu it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I want to bring in Beata and Steve and Roman to answer this, but also maybe just to bring up a Slido question that we have as well that we can maybe consider while we're discussing this, which is one of, I think, a really pointed one that we've discussed a little bit, which is how do you think AI will impact the future of democratic elections? Is this going to result in a more polarized world or less? Beata, I know you have very strong feelings about this.
Yeah, I would like to respond what we heard from the perspective of technological firms. I completely agree that our outlets will need to update our ethical rules. I agree that a lot of media have not done so. I think that there will be a lot of danger of plagiarizing when using AI. I think already journalists are overusing AI and they don't even tell their editors. Just to check, before the panel, I tested AI and I inserted the questions and I asked AI, like ChatGPT, what would you respond? And I got like very sophisticated responses without telling me who said that originally. So I agree. But I also have to say that there is no balanced power between media and platforms. So basically, the situation is not as such that we, by regulating more our ethical standards and doing the fact-checking, even if we do it, we cannot match the power that platforms have. And platforms don't consider media a partner. They consider us a client. Even after the European Media Freedom Act, even after promises we got from the European Commission that basically the platforms, specifically Meta, will be more responsive to us and that there will be more discussion. But what they did, basically they promised to elevate us to the position of a VIP client. And I think that with all the responsibility that the public puts on our shoulders and expect from us, without modifying that power balance, I don't think that we are in the position to fact check the fake news. I mean, fake news is it hasn't been a journalistic problem for over the past 5 years. It's really, it's not because we are doing substandard journalism that fake news is spreading so fast. It's because the technology is so effectively used by those who want to spread fake news. And one last comment, that if you imagine the power of personalization of news, that we as journalists can use. But we are getting to that question that AI is able to so dramatically personalize any question and adjusting to the desires or pre-thoughts of the person who is asking, that we are smashing the shared reality and the shared truth. And that's, again, a challenge that we as journalists alone cannot really address with all the challenges we mentioned without like having more, not the only power, but more openness from the tech giants to basically cooperate with us and consider us as true partners.
And Stephen, you're shaking your head there. I mean, it's not just the two-sided argument of media and big tech. I suppose it is a sort of triangle in that we have politicians who need to regulate here, and the wry smile there is, you know, someone who's had to deal with this. How do we make that work?
Well, it's interesting because RFERL has been around now for 75 years. For much of that time, a substantial amount of our efforts have gone to try to overcome those who would like to silence, who would like to jam our feeds, who would like to block our websites, who would like to imprison our journalists. And one of our recently freed journalists from Radio Free Europe is sitting in the front row today. Thank goodness for that. But this just what ALSU went through for 10 months last year is just an indication of the lengths at which people try to go to silence those who are the purveyors of the truth, who tell stories that that authoritarians don't like to hear. But I think that there is real-time fact-checking going on. There is use of AI tools to help journalists figure out what information is good versus the bad. And on our own means of distribution, through all means necessary these days, I think that we do a good job still. And if we don't, our reputation is lost and it's game over. The problem comes in where Liz made the point that our content is being skimmed, that it's being basically just stolen from us, with no value whatsoever placed around all of the efforts that have gone into generating original reporting or enterprise reporting. And at the end of the day, on those sites that we do not have control over the distribution, the things that we value are not necessarily what drive algorithms. And that's a decision that is made by these companies. And, you know, a really great investigative piece of journalism that should require going beyond just the summary is not necessarily going to be the thing that drives a lot of clicks, but an outrageous opinion that says something that can be instantly shared all around the world is the kind of thing that is getting prioritized and it's being pushed. So that's part of the, you know, I'm not a big proponent of regulation. I think that there are dangers in that. However, we're in a dangerous space right now where there is good information is being squeezed out in this time of information warfare.
Yeah, Roman, do you want to build on that while also perhaps bringing in another question from our Slido, which might be instructive for this, which is from James. It's from an anonymous asker of, if AI doesn't care about truth, which is something that I think was just being talked about there, then it can only rely on user-generated content. How can news outlets survive when, frankly, the cost of and ease of using AI is 1,000 times lower?
Oh yes, this is a very interesting question, and I would like to say some remarks about the subject, because maybe you don't know that 80% of people in the Western countries say that their first source of everyday news are social platforms, not legacy media, social platforms. The second remarks. Between 20 or 30 content generated right now by AI on internet, of course, are so-called lunatic information. This is disinformation, fake news, and lies. Because the LLM are learning on text. Some texts are true, some texts are not true, and they are using these lies too as a normal information. This is a big problem. We can do as a journalist, as WANIFRA, for example. We organized the last Congress, World Congress in Krakow, WANIFRA. As an organization like LINA, Gazeta Wyborcza is a part of this organization. LINA is a leading European newspaper alliance with Die Welt, Le Figaro, La Repubblica, Le Soir, El País, etc. So we, as a journalistic world, we should do and we will do maybe better job, but we need support from government, and we talk a lot about the regulation. But what is crucial from my perspective? I'm a historian. I'm a teacher of history, but I worked 30 years as a journalist, and I remember the world without social platforms and the internet. It was a long, long time ago. But we need education. Education at elementary school, from first class to secondary school, even at university, about media literacy. Really, this is the job and task for government. Maybe you know that Finland has a very fruitful media literacy project at elementary school. Elementary school. This is crucial. We can do everything what we should do and have to do, but without education, the situation like that we will face more and more AI-generated information, disinformation, fake news, etc. It will be like, Don Quixotism. Yes, really. This is crazy. Education is crucial.
And that's interesting. Liz, I maybe want to ask you to build on that in light of another question that we have from the Slido, which is, or a couple actually. One is social media is predominantly utilized by young people who get their information from these platforms. So how dangerous is that to the future of politics? But then there was also another question that I think might be useful to kind of take us into the last 10 minutes or so of discussion, which is what can people actively do to actually protect themselves from this? How can they protect access to information? We've had Roman talk a little bit about the need for education here, but given the generational demographic stuff going on here, how do we find a way forward in a very confused information space?
Yeah, I think certainly public service media in their remit to serve everybody has had for many years now a really strong focus on serving all audiences and working out with all of the data that you can now get from your content online and on social media, understanding who your audience is and who you're missing and reaching out to those. So young audiences have always been a problem in terms of their use of news media, and reaching them is incredibly difficult. But there's been some great success stories across public media, but also private media, to do some really innovative things on different platforms to reach audiences where they are. But in terms of, I wanted to perhaps give a couple of really positive examples of AI, because what we haven't talked about on this panel yet is how AI can really help the media in terms of our workflows and in terms of reaching those audiences. One of the questions before, there's lots of questions naturally about the impact on democracy, and really that's what we care the most about. I want to give you an example from Radio France. They had an interview at lunchtime with their Prime Minister. And between 9 and 10 a.m. every morning on all of the local radio stations across France, they have a phone-in. And they use that phone-in programme across all the local radio stations to say, if you were talking to the Prime Minister, what would you ask? What would your questions be? and they put that audio through an AI engine from all of the local radio stations, 1 hour of audio, so 20 hours of audio, ran it through the AI and got it to summarize what the common themes were, and it helped them inform their interview with the Prime Minister at lunchtime. And there is no way that any human or any group of humans could have listened to 20 hours of audio in 2 hours to be able to produce that interview and to accurately reflect what the public was wanting to ask the Prime Minister. So there are many tools. We're also seeing introduction. We at the EBU have developed a news assistant, a chatbot, where you can interrogate only the information within your organisation. So your audience can, Swedish Radio have used this and others are going to start using it as well, where you can just say, Swedish Radio, what do you tell me about what's happening in Iran or what's happening in Gaza or what's happening in Ukraine? And it will interrogate only the information in that safe space and give you an answer in a conversational tone. You can have a conversation with it. So AI is really going to change how we interact with our audiences, how we deliver the news, and that's, I think, a really positive thing. And comes back to the point you were making, is that we can't fight the new problem with the old technology, and I completely agree. And we have many opportunities for using AI for good.
Yeah, and what's interesting there, and just to flag, as we approach our kind of last 5 minutes, I think we will have a microphone that can kind of come around. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask from the audience, please do stick up your hands, and we'll maybe try and pick up the pace a little bit. But Dritan, Liz there talked about the use of the tech stack, and I know that with what you're doing in EBU, that is internally done. But a lot of these AI systems are US-based, and they are often replicating those kind of Silicon Valley dominances that we have. There was a question here, I think, which was more about social media from the Slido, but why are there no European social media platforms of scale as alternatives to big American tech? I guess we could widen that out to AI as well. And as someone who's worked in this space, why do you think that is?
Well, I think in Europe, you have a phenomenon of over-regulation, which then stifles European innovation, and that's why you don't have this European-led products. And it's unfortunate because this technology will develop in the United States, in China, elsewhere, and whether it's AI or social media, it sips like water through the cracks. It comes back. So you need guardrails, and you need enforcement, and you need clear consequences for the misuse of these technologies. But that is more effective on the back end than it really is on the front end. If you overregulate on the front end, you take away the oxygen that's required for the environment to work. I will say one thing. The premise of one of the questions that was asked, AI doesn't care about the truth, is wrong. AI reflects the person that builds it. The philosophers of the future will write in zeros and ones. And actually, the beauty about AI is that you don't really need to understand how to write in code, because its language is English, Polish, Albanian, Georgian, any language. I challenge the youth in this audience and other people to actually leverage AI to build the tools of the future, to check on whether something is real, on whether something is not, because it's much easier than people think. And it's not about who's building the large language models in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. They're making investments in data centers and in supercomputers. The way that AI functions is through something called RAG models, retrieval augmented generation models. Anyone can train them. If you use OpenAI on a data set, my data set as a pollster around this research, it will only have 20% accuracy. But if I have one of my analysts spend a day or more training one of these models to read it accurately, it could read it with 95% accuracy. So that goes to show how the power in the age of AI is in the hands of every individual. And again, instead of fighting it, we have to co-opt it. And enough people of goodwill have to leverage it so that it can countermand the misuse of AI from people who do not have goodwill.
Roman, briefly?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed that we have our European social platform, but the one thing, of course, is over-regulating our market, but the second one is very effective lobbying from, for example, Google. Google, official from Google, came for decades to Warsaw, to Berlin, to Paris, and say, you don't need new social platform. We deliver you everything. What do you need? And this is the problem. But if we talk about the European AI startups or very big success, if we talk about this market, we have the success like that. For example, 11 Lab. This is a very interesting company created by Polish people. Right now, this company is in American hands because the owner of this company is one of the, I think, American found. So, yeah, this is the problem, that some of very good specialists, very good, interesting scientists, if we talk about the AI, we lose these people to America.
Yeah.
Interesting. Beata, just in a sort of 30 seconds.
Yeah, just in response, but AI is not only used by philosophers and good-willed thinkers. And again, there is a disbalance between what it does when powers and governments are using AI. And one last thought, but we haven't really talked much about one of the most important role of journalism and its controlling power, and it's the watchdog role. And that watchdog role also involves basically controlling tech firms, and that's what they really resist. Also, the AI can do so many things, but unless journalists are empowered and protected from all the harmful effects, their ability to control powers will be weakened, and the power will always use technological advances to weaken that ability of journalists to control them.
Indeed. Stephen, I want to ask you to maybe just wrap us up a little bit, hopefully positively. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty since 1949. Clue is in the name. Liberty and free Europe. Yep. Journalism's gone through a lot of challenges in the past. Can we overcome this one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we play a vital role. There have been any number of different challenges through the years, but these are very powerful tools. We're seeing Russia in particular spending billions trying to, we talked about working the models, putting in good information in, getting the models to evaluate information. Russia's spending a tremendous amount of money to put bad information, using bots and everything to try to affect these models. When we talked before about joining forces with like-minded people who want to get it right, we have to figure out a way to make sure that accurate information is also being fed into these models, that keep our information flow into these systems, these very powerful tools, that our information is a part of this landscape. And if that happens, then I do think there is a very bright future.
Indeed. Well, look, one thing I think that we can take from this is that we're not exactly ignoring this problem. We are trying to come up with solutions, even if it is incredibly difficult. Just to flag, so we have now a 30-minute coffee break served in the lobby, but please do join us back here in this room for 11:10 for the last debate on the Schwarzenberg stage at this conference, which is going to be on Brazil's Blue Amazon. But before we all get our coffees and start to think about how we're going to solve the world's problems, please do give a hand to all of our audience members and our panelists here.